Oh.
3 weeks ago, supposedly, probably 4 by this point.
That sounds right. Because we had to skip one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, Andreas, take it away. Good job. We'll just edit that in later. So,
but that assumes that we edit. We can't look at YouTube for 30 seconds to see if we counted correctly. That means that we also cannot edit. Do not raise the bar past what we can do.
Not cannot. Do not.
Will not.
Apparently will not.
Yeah, refuse to.
Because we're coming up on year 10, right? And have
not once have we edited anything.
That's true, right? Because like even in the early days when we had an intro, it wasn't edited, it was just piped in, which is, and it was, we appreciate what you did for us, whomever you were, because that's been lost to space and time, but we were begged to stop doing that. So,
Yeah, if I remember right, it only happened like the one episode.
Oh no, it went on for a little while. Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Maybe that was, no, you've been there since the beginning, like always, right? You've been, because we did have a couple of other transient hosts and people that were like less, consistent, that eventually just ghosted us. I mean, they went on to better things. I've been telling the people about my coworker who left the company. I was like, he's out sniffing flowers now or whatever. That's my new thing, instead of like he's dead to us or whatever. Is like he's smelling the flowers or whatever. So, but anyway, so for us, welcome to the Dresden Files podcast. If you were here for while we weren't recording, we're so sorry. And why? No, I'm just kidding. But we're doing the writer's room. We're in Death Masks Part 4. The director got that right, even though it's been a month. So,
I mean, I can't do math, but like my gut instinct, like this is a number 4. I was good.
Yeah, I don't think it's a math problem. It's a memory problem as much as anything, right? So, I have absolute faith in you to be able to count to 4 every day on the regular, if your life depended on it. But anyway, so
I can probably count to 4. Just don't actually make me like add a tip or something.
Yeah. See, and we're in my podcast brain where I'm just going to talk and say nonsense. But if you haven't heard it and you're into metal and you want to have some fun, Psycho Stick, I can only count to 4. Just saying, go listen to that. You're welcome. Because they basically took Let the Bodies Hit the Floor and then put Muppets in front of it. So it's Jesus. Wonderful. And if you haven't listened to a bunch of their other stuff, like Beer is Good, Beer is Great, and a bunch of, they're just a lot of fun. So anyway, shameless plug, and you're welcome for the free advertising. All like 2 people that are listening to this. Just kidding. So there's dozens of us. Death Masks, Writer's Room, Part 4. I almost said Chapter 4. That's not right. We're in Chapter 22. But to give a little bit of a refresher, Dresden has been captured by Nicodemus, right? Spoilers. So last time he woke up under the cold stream, he's more or less being tortured in the most inhuman way possible, which is with breakfast. I don't know. I'm getting deja vu vibes. So if we've covered this more, then I apologize. But and then Nicodemus complaining
that there's going to be a significant amount of budget dedicated to breakfast.
A non-trivial amount, sure. Like we'll have to, like, we'll just put our regular spread out there for like 20 minutes so that they can get shots of it and whatever to edit in later, because we're eating that all the time. Maybe that's what we'll do. I'll be Nicodemus because I'll be like, this is my breakfast and you wish you could have some. And practical effects. So we've had our actor chained up underwater for the last 12 hours staring at my breakfast. Real. Yeah, right. Like that's not character acting. That's torture. So thought that was worth a spit take at least, but okay. Never mind. Nicodemus complains about how hard it is to waylay an angelic messenger. And then Deidre comes in, and then basically Nicodemus is tempting him with the coin, with Lashiel's coin. And then he's like, sorry, this is kind of temporally important, so I'm going to need you to make a speedy choice. And, Dresden's quotes, lead me not into temptation, fuck off, Nick. And then, hey, we made it 5 minutes, so we can say the F word now. Chapter 22 starts out, and why that's contextually important is because that is, Jim's classic cliffhanger, right? But chapter 22 starts out, Nicodemus basically like grabs Dresden by the hair and yanks his head back with the sacrificial knife. And then Deidre's like, don't you need a bowl or something? And he's like, oh, silly me. Oh, I just lose my head if it wasn't attached, right, Dresden? And, he sends somebody to go fetch the bowl. When the goon goes to open the door, Shiro kicks him across the room, 80s kung fu movie style, right?
It's Mr. Miyagi.
Inexplicable. Yeah, the inexplicable dust comes off the bad guy in Shiro's pants, and then he flexes and he's like, ding dong. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, Shiro basically Yoda's around the room, right? If you've seen Clone Wars, you know what I'm talking about. But he basically breaks this goon's nose and cuts that guy's, gun in half and just whatever. And Dresden's like, oh boy, that was fast. I don't know about you guys, but that looked fast to me. I bet you that sword's so sharp that he'd cut you and you'd still be thinking he missed when you fell apart or something, or when your face fell off, right? Yeah, he says, I did have it in my notes. I bet that could hit you and you wouldn't even realize until your face fell off on your feet. Which is funny because my grandpa used to talk about how sharp his knives were in a similar kind of way. Like, they'd be like, you missed. And he'd be like, oh yeah, wiggle your ears, and then, so anyway, Nicodemus has done the, evil overlord manliness thing. And he has retreated behind Dresden and holding the knife on him and is squeezing Dresden's throat and everything and saying, shut up and whatever. And then Shiro's like, Dresden, please. Like, you're not helping. So this is where they negotiate the deal. Basically, he's going to let Dresden go, and Nicodemus is like, no, I need somebody of a certain metaphysical mass, which I wildly appreciate that term being used in the Dresden Files. And Shiro's like, yeah, I know, which is why you're going to keep me. And Nicodemus is like, no, because you're going to cheat somehow. You're going to escape and all this other stuff. And he's like, what if I gave you my word? And so they negotiate. And basically the gist is Shiro will not try to escape or release himself, which I assume is he can just tell the angels he's ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. A flight of angels to take me home, basically, right? So he says he won't cheat or anything like that for 24 hours. And then, Nicodemus pulls something like, oh, give me the sword and you and Dresden can go free. And he's like, no, because I know the value of your word and you know the value of mine. And so basically Dresden runs up to Shiro and is like, hey, let's make a run for it. And he's like, no, I gave my word. And, basically talking, and it's like, Harry, you need to go now. Please take this and tell, Michael, he'll understand or whatever. Right. So he gets the sword and gets pushed out, and Anduriel envelops Shiro. Right. And then Nicodemus, of course, is an evil overlord. So he yells, for them to kill Dresden and get the sword. So Dresden, this gets us to chapter 23. So yeah, Dresden basically runs out right into a goon. Pretty scrappy fight, has to fight him. He's like, barefoot and sopping wet and everything like that. But Susan climbs down the ladder and comes to help, and Dresden tries to pass the sword off to her, and it bites her. Mm-hmm. It's like, what the hell? I hate that thing. So
yeah, whatever it is, it sucks.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so they're climbing up out of the sewer and everything, which is actually quite a feat for Dresden at this point. And Deidre comes like, a blender up the hallway and up the ladder. And they get up to the top, and I want to say like Martin has to drop a flashbang past them, but basically like they're almost at the top, and then it's like, okay, cover, and he drops a flashbang and stuns Deidre. They get to the car, they do another high speed chase. Susan takes Dresden and basically wraps him up, and they jump out of the car while it's traveling at a high rate of speed. Apparently dark, and the goons do not have a very high perception check because they do not see two people just bounce across the road over to Dresden's house, right?
Well, part of it is they needed to just get inside, and then he has wards that would be fine. And
right.
so, or at least it's just like,
but like the goons don't even
inside,
stop. They don't even stop, right? They just keep chasing Martin. So it's one of those like, again, 80s style, like
Martin has a superpower of being extremely bland, but also being the target at all times.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's the perfect tank, right? He's like, he doesn't take aggro unless he intends to, so yeah, so Martin ends up drawing them off. Yeah, I wish I had grabbed the context for this, but that takes us into 24, where they get inside their house, they lock down the wards, and Dresden makes some tongue-in-cheek comment about like, you like me because my assertive and my assertive masculineness or whatever, and it's like, is running and hiding assertively masculine? So pretty sure that's Susan ribbing him on and everything like that. He lights the candles for the wards, and then they're going to be trapped for a minimum of 5 hours. They're meant to go for 8 hours, but daylight is coming, and that has, he explains that it degrades magic and everything. He goes to get cleaned up and leaves Susan in the front room, and then comes out, and she's 6 inches from the door. And she's like, you need to hold me back right now. And I think she's got like black eyes, and she's vamping out and everything.
Yeah, she's at the point of needing to be restrained because she's overdone it. And I think Martin was trying to warn her about that in the car of like, you're past the point of being safe about this. And her tattoos were still black, and they're becoming more and more red right now. And she's trying to explain what that is. And nope, they're locked in the tiny little apartment for 5 hours now.
Right. Yeah. So Dresden takes her over to the couch, I think, and they sit down, and he's asking her about the Fellowship of St. Giles and what's the deal with the tattoos and all of that exposition and everything like that. And then, she like leans in and tries to bite him or something like that. And I think he had gotten the rope, and it gets explained in here somewhere that it's fairy make, like it's got unicorn hair woven into it, and it's meant to hold ogres, type of thing, because wouldn't you know it, we just had a book about that. So what if the fairies came knocking on my door and I needed to be prepared for it? So she lunges at him, and he says Manicus, and they whip over and wrap her up more or less, and then he uses Fosari to attach him to the ceiling, which I didn't remember. It was kind of interesting. It's a two-parter, but this is where you're going to have to fade to black for the podcast, because this is Brown Chicken Brown Cow. I'm not going to get into all the bumping and grinding and everything that happens, but it's for the art, so because at some point we're going to have that conversation with the actress, who plays Susan. It's like, how far are we taking this, really?
It was important enough to show in the books based on a bet, I believe. So
sure,
it should be important enough to show in the series. Doesn't have to be obviously explicit.
We're purists, right? We just want to properly adapt the book, so yeah.
And this is why it's relevant that he had a conversation with Molly about Funtime handcuffs.
It's foreshadowing, of course, again, for the art. So yeah.
Because Harry's not smart enough to have that idea. 14-year-old Molly was.
Well, to be fair, he already had the handcuffs.
Yeah. Oh, he had the handcuffs. He had the rope, but like, did he put together, what can I do with this as a tool? No.
I know, what a fool, right? He's got handcuffs. The problem is he just didn't have a girlfriend at the time, right? So, and Susan just had to like show up on his doorstep again. So yeah. So, that's how that starts, right? Never mind. I'm not getting into this. So anyways, Brown Chicken, Brown Cow, we'll figure that out when we get to the point. Everybody gets the idea. And if you don't, It's chapter 25 in Death Masks. You're welcome. So, it's, minute 43 and 11 seconds, so get through all the small talk. So it does fade to black at some point because with chapter 26, we basically wake up and Susan's doing Tai Chi in the living room. I think she's wearing one of Dresden's shirts and not much else, right? So, let's see. So Susan catches him up on, what happened after he was grabbed, updating on the knights, and let's see. I put a note in here since, we're doing writer's room and that sort of thing. So do we want to honor this as the way the book had it and we just have them talk about it? Or do we want to do one of those like inexplicable episodes where it's like, here is Michael and Sonia in St. Louis, because that'll open us up for a spin-off show that nobody's asking for. And so, we have the buddy cop in St. Louis episode, Yeah.
I feel it's probably better to do something like showing them for a minute or two in St. Louis instead of just we're talking about it and then people lose the track of like, what are they talking about? And like, the people not paying attention to what they're watching anymore. And they just, what does this have to do with that? What were they doing? Why couldn't they have been there? I think showing it a little bit more drives the point home. But considering in the book, we only get that it's just being talked about that they are elsewhere in St. Louis. Kind of
right.
It's a soft opinion.
And they mostly wind up in handcuffs, right? And so it's like, I'm pretty sure they get held for like 24 hours or whatever, right? Because the whole point was that it was a sand trap for Michael and Sonia so that they couldn't save Shiro, among other things. The other part too is like if we wanted to make it reasonably more exciting, we could. This is a complete addition, right? So this is something I normally complain about, like, elves showing up at Helm's Deep or something. But if we wanted to do a full episode, we could still make it Denarian related. And this could be where we introduce Tessa, right? And that Nicodemus sicked them on other Denarians. And that's how he believably got them out of Chicago, is because they go and deal with, because it's like these guys have supernatural senses, right? They should be able to show up in St. Louis and be like, I feel a disturbance in the force. There's a Denarian nearby, right? That to me, it's like it's made up, but it's believable.
I don't think we should do Tessa because that makes implications of Tessa and Nicodemus's relationships that might not be accurate. And so I feel like
Nicodemus is throwing her under the bus,
right?
Like,
but
I'm not
if
saying
she's
like
in
they
St.
were
Louis
in league,
and he's in Chicago, they're really close by. It's like that feels like even to that part, they're they're not that
that's
far.
Like north to south, isn't it? Like, am I thinking St. Louis is further south than it is?
So it's not that far from Chicago. I mean, at the end, which is where like Ned's point is getting to, when they foil the plot at O'Hare, Nicodemus gets on a train going to St. Louis because it's another international airport. And so he like Nicodemus seating the ground and sending one of his own flunkies there. Maybe he sends some of the squires. Like I was thinking maybe he sends like Cassius there for a day or something to try to make it a viable plan B. But we need Cassius in.
I need you to go down to St. Louis and get your vibe everywhere. Like, just start stinking up the place and just be like, oh, the knights, there was like 50 denarians here. Like, there's only 30 coins, aren't there? But this Nicodemus was here for sure. Cassius is just like stinking up the place with black magic. So,
I wouldn't do that. Nicodemus was throwing another denarian under the bus because if that was so close, it was that a denarian that was working with Nicodemus.
Sure.
Not
I mean, so you could do like Magog or something like that, which would give like another personal thing for Sonia, because
maybe this is what Ursiel was doing before he was beheaded, and now they need to go clean up the mess of whatever is remaining in St. Louis and the squires or something. They could be the stand-in red shirts.
Yeah, I feel like that's getting into like original Dresden TV show territory where it's like, yes, the Denarian, he left a cult behind that we've got to clean up now or whatever. But
It can work.
To close the gap on the St. Louis thing, it's not as far as I thought, but it's still 300 miles away, so it's pretty far, right? But it's close enough they could have gotten there in a day and back, depending on how
Yeah.
long they spent in St. Louis.
Yeah, that could
Um,
be a day trip, a long day,
yeah,
depending on how long, but
right, and assuming like angels are involved, then like
yeah.
maybe can paladins speed like on the lawful scale, right? They're breaking the law, but they're not breaking their oath or anything like that. So, like, would angels like help them
I
safely
think
traverse that?
Paladin would accept that sometimes traffic laws are applying only to other people. When I have an emergency of cosmic need, I am going to go as fast as possible to get there to save souls.
Sure.
Because like if Michael was an EMT or something and needed to get like over there to save somebody and give them CPR, he would do that no matter how violating traffic laws he would do, like
Well, yeah, but yeah, because his official duties as a paramedic and whatever. So yeah,
yeah. But
he's
even if
doing
he was
CPR on
off
America's
duty,
soul. No,
exactly,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, well, and I mean, to get too biblical, like the verse that comes to mind is to Caesar what is Caesar's, and leave to God what is his, and like,
isn't that about
the
taxes?
well, it's about the coins specifically and stuff like that, but yeah, so anyway, okay, so let's see, we talked about what they were doing. um And then I think Susan is like, the wards are about to come down. They've got a couple minutes left and everything like that. And it's like, what if the Denarians are waiting outside for us? Um, I picked up my blasting rod from the stand in the corner by the door and twirled it around in my fingers. They'll have to find their own cab. Oh, yeah. Cause he's like, we'll get a cab and we'll go do this and whatever. And it's like, but what if the Denarians are outside waiting for us? They're going to have to get their own cab. It's hilarious. So, anyway. Um, Another getting ready to go montage, I think. We should just reuse the same footage. Just kidding. So and then like if they're about to get out or they're in the cab or whatever, and then Susan hits him with the old last night didn't mean anything. Like, sure.
Mhm.
So like you can't have it mean anything doesn't make those words true, and like obviously call me in 9 months or don't. How about you wait for like 7 or 8 years and then call me? So jerk. So
Yeah. They're both aware enough that it can't mean anything doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything, and so they both kinda see past those words.
sure, but professionals. So
Mm, what does that
yeah.
mean?
Well, they're focused on the mission. So in this case, and the mission is he's gonna go duel a vampire, and she's gonna pretend not to know that Martin was there to shoot him in the face. So be like, "Yeah, I was wondering why you had that gigantic sniper rifle, but
Yeah.
weird." No. um,
Yeah, so this
yeah,
is
so
one of the moments of whiplash I have in this book of, like, the first thing they do is go duel the vampire no, they're going to Michael's house, right? And then he goes and duels the vampire? Like, balancing the
um,
Ortega plot with the Denarians that have now taken over all
yeah,
of the attention is, like, you can see the stitching and the seams, and it's just like, what were we doing?
they do go to Michael's first, actually. Yeah, so that's what this is, and we get more details on like what happened with Sonya and them, and then the next one is Cassius. So yeah, I guess the duel is after. But yeah, so this is actually the getting ready montage because I included like all the gear, right? Because it's like if we're gonna go through that, but he does take Shiro's cane, uh, and then he makes a mental note to get himself a freaking golf bag, which is funny because he does that later. So they took the cab to McAnally's. The Blue Beetle was still there in a nearby lot. It hadn't been stolen, vaporized, or otherwise mishandled. So um Susan's like, "Oh my god, what happened to your car?" And Dresden's like, "Chlorophene." And Susan's like, "Wait, what? A plant monster? Oh, well, why didn't you just say plant monster? I have my pride. So Susan checks for bombs and be like, thank you, 007, but no one bombs a Volkswagen. They're too cute. So,
They
you
are
know,
pretty cute, but his is like, I don't know. Does he still have seats, or did the mold demon attack at this point?
I don't remember. I think this might be pre mold demon, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, his is ugly duckling. Like someday it'll be a beautiful swan, but
I
yeah.
think the mold demon is about to happen after this book, because I think in opening with Blood Rights, when Thomas is like, "Yeah, your life is great," when they're in the car, it's like they're sitting on
Right,
like cardboard
bare
buckets or
metal.
something like that. Because
Yeah,
yeah, it's just like, this mold demon. What do you want? Get a better
right.
car.
Yeah. Sorry, Thomas. Not all of us have the platinum titanium unlimited card.
Yeah.
That Dad pays off every quarter. So, so they they drive up to Michael's house, and Susan's like, "The grass is green. It's February, and his grass is green. Doesn't that strike you as strange?" Sod works in mysterious ways. So, yeah. Yeah. So Father Fort Hill answers the door with a baseball bat. Charity took the kids to her mother's. Fort Hill offers Dresden coffee and a donut. And Dresden's like, Father, you have never been closer to converting me. So, um,
Charity taking the kids to her mother's, it does make things narratively simpler right now, but also she just downgraded security.
theoretically, Michael doesn't have his retirement plan yet, right?
Yeah, but
Like probably still presumably there are still a couple of, I wouldn't say they're staffed. I'm just saying when the Angels go on a coffee break, they all happen to go to Michael's house, so he doesn't have the you will have 5 Angels on duty at all times, plan. He's just got the, hey, we were popping by, we smelled the coffee and the donuts and we wanted some, he's got
did
that
the
plan.
donuts have sprinkles?
Yeah, of course, they whatever you want because they're angels. But yeah, like, it just so happens that there are a few thousand angels that go on break every 15 minutes, and so it's just like there's just always one nearby, also, the sword. Anyway. um yeah, so the Dresden and Fort Hill share notes. Michael and Sonia were arrested, which is why, like, maybe showing their perspective less exciting, but I wrote those notes before. um you get more of Nicodemus's backstory, and specifically the whole, like, we're not really sure how long he's been around or what he's done, because he keeps burning our records down every couple of 100 years just to throw us off his trail, which it's like, okay, but yeah, but computers have been a thing for a little while. Like, get some cloud backups going, guys. But
Yeah.
they do have some like partial records, right? So they're like, we've got his name, we know he's been around for a while, just whatever people can remember to try and rebuild records, and whatever survives the fires, and stuff like that. Dresden, I take some jelly from a donut, I think, and draws out Lashiel's thing before he eats it, or he like draws it in the chocolate, one of those, but he draws it and then eats the donut, which I feel like, that's why he got hit with the coin. I don't know. Like, you're just asking for it at that point, kind of. So,
I mean, it's
um,
it's not a bad way of destroying a symbol.
sure,
Uh,
sure. But now it's in you. You've ingested that, like
yeah.
thaumaturgically, I feel like that, anyway. But Fort Hill positively identifies the coin he saw as Lashiel, right? Um, and then Valmont is there, which might be another reason to get the kids out of the house, right? Just from a
That's true.
practical standpoint. So Valmont is in the room sleeping the events off, I guess, sleeping mostly naked, which I feel like is a little bit of a weird choice for someone who would want to make an escape, but maybe she's leaning into the whole femme fatale, like, I'm more vulnerable this way, and that'll have them lower their guard, which Dresden's an idiot. So of course that part works. Um, Dresden plays hardball with her a little bit because she's not, cooperating, and he threatens to call the police. Um, and then, um, you know, Dresden's like, well, it's Marcone, isn't it? And it's like, well, I'm reasonably sure it is. And it's like, well, does Marcone know that? And her quote is, one doesn't mention to the buyer that you know who he is when he's taking precautions to prevent it. It's impolite. So, you know,
There are
so
some
yeah.
norms to be held in this kind of dance.
Yeah, no, it's just fun because she is like, she's a thief, but she's still highly professional, right? You know, she's got her rules and leans into the tropes and everything. Um, yeah, so she gets up and puts on some clothes and she's gonna go get in the shower and everything. And she does the good old stumble and bump. And Dresden's an idiot, so he falls for it, of course. Like, he really ought to know better as a private investigator. It's like, how many times have you caught other people do this on the street or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But she basically goes in, runs a steamy shower, gets out through the window, and takes off with the Blue Beetle, you know, because she palmed his keys. So now she's got his jacket and his car. What a jerk. They come out and Fort Hill is doing carpentry work. So, you know, he's trying to help Michael with the addition while Michael's out doing, you know, the Lord's work and all that stuff. This is where they're talking and they hear the Blue Beetle drive off, and it's like, geez, you know, not again. Again, how many times has that happened? But because he's doing the carpentry work, he's got his sleeves rolled up literally, and Dresden sees the tattoo of Thoth. And that's when it's like, oh, I'm a big idiot. And that
Yeah.
was the missing puzzle piece that I needed and everything. Um, so they have a bunch of back and forth that I didn't necessarily write down verbatim, but we were kids and we got together and we fought a vampire, and then we were drinking and we kept in touch and we reported spooky things for a while. But you know, we kind of all grew out of it. And honestly, other than that night, I haven't heard from Vincent, you know, since, and assumed he was out of it and whatever. And so, like, even with the fact that Vincent had been replaced, like, they had done such a good job about it that Fort Hill didn't twig to anything being weird, right? Until Dresden realizes that he's pretty sure they forgot the tattoo, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone's like, wait, what's wrong? And he says, get anything you need for a fight, we're going. So the next scene is, you know, Vincent's hotel motel. I think he's been staying in a motel, which is also kind of telling, right? But you know, Vincent opens the door and Dresden kicks the door through him, you know, basically, pushes him down with a baseball bat and pulls a gun. And, you know, basically says, I forget what it is, but it's like, you know, you've got one chance to tell me the thing, and he's still lying. So Dresden pulls the trigger, and Cassius melts and does all of this stuff, but the trigger gets pulled on an empty chamber. And so it was all a bluff, you know, but it basically got Cassius to break character, because it's like, I mean, if he is really Vincent, if I'm wrong, then I'm not going to shoot a priest, you know, and whatever. So Cassius, you know, rolls out, he turns into Snake Boy. He, you know, attacks Dresden a little bit, but then he tries to make a run for it. And Sonya flattens him with a 2x6, which I feel like is awfully specific. So it's got to be that. Jim has a way of like obfuscating things and details at times, but this was picked. This is important. So yeah, then Michael drags him back into the motel room by his tail. So it's like, yeah, we're all here for business, right? So basically, I want to include everything, right? Because there's a bunch of snarking back and forth, and you know,
Yeah, this is an important moment, and it has ramifications for later. So
right.
This can take a lot of time.
There's a lot of like, well, how did you know? And Dresden kind of breaks it down, and Cassius being smug and like, well, any monkey could have deduced that. And, you know, oh, I expect you feel particularly clever. And then he's like, and then, because it starts out with like, oh, how did you know? Oh, you forgot the tattoo. There was no tattoo. But there was, you know, and everything like that. And so they go back and forth. But like, as Dresden gets into it, he gets a couple of jabs in, and Cassius starts to clam up a little bit. and he changes tactics and starts like threatening Susan, and it's like, you were there to save her last time, but you won't be there to save her next time, and all that stuff. um yeah, so uh Dresden basically explains the whole book, and the Denarian subterfuge and everything to get Cassius to fill in the gaps, and like what they're doing with the shroud and all of that stuff. And then I think he gets threatened by Michael, and then, basically like immediately drops the coin. He
Yeah.
basically undoes his guys, peels the coin, I think, off of his hand or whatever, and drops it and be like, "Oh, please, knight, I repent." And, this demon had corrupted me and all this stuff. And basically, like, I want it to be so over the top because Cassius knows what he's doing and the knights know what he's doing, and Michael talks about that later and everything like that. So this is where, Dresden starts threatening him bad cop style, right? And the knights basically, like, they sheathe their swords and they fold their arms, and like they're like, we literally can't do anything about this. So sorry. And they basically, like, Michael picks up the coin and they leave. And so Dresden, is all pissed off, and like, you probably think you got away with this and whatever. And he goes to make for the door and then spins around and just clobbers Cassius, right? So you get minutes of him beating on Cassius. Like, it is not pretty, because he talks about like a few dozen swings to break an arm or something like that. So I'm like, Jesus, like, those movies where you're like, you think you're okay with violence, and then they like keep either stabbing or beating the guy and he's screaming the entire time. It's one of those. Like, it's not a good time. So he's just clobbering on him for a few minutes, breaking, he broke his knee in the first swing, I think, and then, breaking his arms and everything like that. And then he drops like a quarter or something like that, and it's like, there's a payphone across the parking lot, try to avoid the broken glass. Maybe you can call yourself an ambulance or something like that. And so they all walk in silence to Michael's truck, and they get in, and Michael noted, phone calls cost more than that now, don't they? And I slouched back and allowed myself a small smile. Yeah, I know. So they start laughing. Michael's like pounding on the keyboard. He's pounding on his steering wheel and everything like that. So yeah, they just lose it. But yeah, it's kind of funny. And I was thinking, like, I don't remember, maybe we talked about this last time and everything like that too, but it's like, with the anachronism, right, and doing it historically accurate, we don't even necessarily have to make it a period piece to make that make sense. Like, you could still drop the quarter and be like, there's a payphone across the street and whatever, and then be like, wait, didn't they take that payphone out or something like that? And just, I think the joke will land just fine without being like,
It wouldn't take much to
explanation or
change.
shifting. Yeah. So because that was my first thought. I was like, oh crap, here's another thing where it's like a period piece, because it's like, I gotta tell you, like, if there is a payphone, it's for 911 purposes, not for functional phone call purposes. So yeah. But one of the other, like, good scenes in the book, like, it's brutal what they do to Cassius, but in the comparison to what he's done, over hundreds, if not thousands of years, like, let's just call that a down payment for justice, so. Yeah, so the next one, I want to say Murphy shows up at Dresden's apartment. So they go back to the apartment and Murphy shows up. So yeah, there were a few more chapters between here and the duel, I guess. But Harry fills in Murphy. Maybe it's a phone call. I should have written that down. But I think she calls him because homicide detectives are on their way to his apartment. And they suspect that Nicodemus is using Rudolph to hunt for the shroud, I think is the gist of it. They're using Rudolph to hunt for the shroud. Sorry, I got that backwards. Because what happens is, like, they're pretty sure Nicodemus is going to go to the airport with it, off of what Cassius was talking about, because I think he talks about the whole curse and everything. And Dresden had those pieces anyway, more or less. And so he's going to the airport, and Dresden's like, well, you should call in a bomb threat. And it's like, do you have any idea how irresponsible that is and whatever? It's like, you have any idea how bad it's going to be if this plague goes off? You can't tell them a supernatural plague is coming, but you can call in a bomb threat. And it's basically the same thing. But then they were like, use Rudolph. And the line is like, they're going to tell Rudolph that Harry thinks the shroud is at the airport and is on his way. So Rudolph is going to go there looking for Dresden. And if he accidentally gets the shroud along the way, then so be it. But that'll put pressure on, Nicodemus and them.
Yeah.
Theoretically limit their movements and whatever. But they also acknowledge the fact that it's like, you can't send regular cops because these guys aren't playing. They're just going to kill people.
Yeah.
So
they have to evacuate the place. They can't just try to do everything while everyone's still there and calm.
Right. Yeah, this one bears context. Really? Okay, thanks. Guess I'm not going to get that context. So anyway, they send Rudolph, and then Susan helps them escape in Martin's rental car. Like basically, the detectives are showing up right around the same time. Let's see. And then I've got in here like Susan's response to something Harry said, but I didn't get like what he said. So, because she calls him a chauvinist pig. There we go. Let's see. So, let's see, what are we doing? Oh, they're talking about Cassius. That's what it is. So, we caught the imposter. He told us where the bad guys are going to be later tonight. What'd you do with him? I told her. She looked at me for a while and then said, "Are you all right?" "Fine." "You don't look fine." "It's done. But are you all right?" "I don't know. I'm glad you didn't see it." "Oh, why?" "You're a girl. Beating up bad guys is a boy thing." "Chauvinist pig." "Yeah, I get it from Murphy. She's a bad influence." That was the only part that I had. I was like, shit, I don't remember what they were talking about. So, but yeah, just a reminder of the great dialogue, right? So, but this is where they're driving to the stadium. So they're like a block away from Michael's house, right? Because his neighborhood is like right next to the stadium.
Yeah, somehow he's in the middle of Chicago, has a gigantic suburban house, and is like right next to everything important.
Yeah, and yeah, in like a not super great part of town. Like, I don't know. Yeah, so
his neighborhood is the great part of town.
Well, yeah,
because
I mean, right. Yeah, his neighborhood is like an oasis, so especially now that there's going to be a fairy queen living in it, or has been, so
yes, that will definitely make things better.
Right. Yeah, so they go to the empty stadium because they're going to duel at Wrigley Field, because where else are you going to do that in Chicago? And they get out, and Susan is now Dresden's second. And Ortega shows up with all his goons. Well, not all his goons, I think just with his second. And then I didn't look at Ortega, but I drew out my staff with me, planted it on the ground, and stared at the stadium. The wind caught my coat and blew it back enough to show the gun on my hip now and again. I traded in my sweats for dark jeans and a black silk shirt, and he goes and talks on like, well, the Mongols wore silk, so same principle, right? If he's going to get stabbed, he doesn't want his guts to go out with it. So,
I mean, whatever makes him feel better.
Right. Yeah, so then Thomas, of course, comes like squealing in with his sports car, and gets out, and a bunch of cans and bottles fall out practically, and just playing into him being drunk and that sort of thing. And then Kincaid comes out, driving like a little golf cart, and he's like, "Where's the little Asian guy?" And he's like, "Sorry, he's out, had to go to the bench." Nice bench. So I mean, Kincaid, come on, he's still a man.
Yeah.
So, presumably.
Well, Kincaid and Dresden have similar taste in women.
Sure. Right. So. I mean, that's fair. Yeah. It's like, if Dresden wasn't so jealous, like they could share notes or something, but yeah. Um, yeah, let's see. Yeah, so they basically get driven inside and everything like that. They go to the middle, and then Kincaid signals the archive. The archive emerged from the dugout carrying a small carved wooden box before her. She wore a dark dress with no frills or ruffles and a gray cape held closed with a silver brooch. And then he's Dresden's got some comment about her coming out from the visitors dugout or something like that, and he's like, I'll try not to read into that, because it's like maybe she's not playing for the home team, is the implication. So and then she basically asks everybody if they know what Mordite is and that sort of thing. And Dresden gets to be a wizard for a minute and he gets to explain it. Ortega does know it, but Dresden's explaining it for Susan and everybody else present, kind of thing. Well, Susan and Thomas, I guess, and then Thomas is like, Deathstone, huh? It sort of looks like someone spray painted a soap bubble and gave it tentacles, which I wanted to include so that we could give that to the special effects team and be like, I want it to look like somebody spray painted a soap bubble. Yeah,
that is the description. So, it has to look just like that.
Right. Like, let's do that. So, and then Thomas goes to poke it. Dresden's perspective, I caught his wrist before he could touch it and pushed away his hand. It kills, hence the name Deathstone, you half-wit.
Yeah, dumb party boy Thomas is very entertaining.
Right.
As much of a facade as it is.
It is a bit of a shame that we don't get to see that as much anymore, like if ever, so we've now got brooding Thomas, but like him pretending to be an idiot was a lot of fun, but I guess that part of the masquerade, we're well past that at this point, so
yeah,
because definitely this next book, it's like, wait, you're playing the game?
He's still kind of pretending to be a party boy while playing the game, but then it's completely dropped after Blood Rites.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's completely dropped after Turncoat, but he still at least pretends a little bit.
Tomas is not the same party boy.
That's fair, but I think Tomas is just a different cover too. That's fair, I guess. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about Tomas. What I was thinking of is like, when does Zero happen? Zero happens at the start of Turncoat, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so like that's where I think he's made it back to the court, and then the Nagloshi gets him. So I missed the whole Tomas, thing in the middle. Yeah. Okay. So the archive continues. Seconds will observe from first and third bases facing their duelist opponents. Mr. Kincaid will ensure that no undue interference is perpetrated by either second. I have instructed him to do so with extreme prejudice. Thomas wobbled a little and eyed the archive. Eh? The girl faced him and said, he'll kill you if you interfere. Oh, gotcha, pumpkin. So just like another great moment. So this whole thing. So then we get the duel, right? And Dresden's sitting there thinking like, if I was Ortega, I'd probably open up with everything I got and make this over as soon as possible. And while he's thinking about that, the Deathstone comes within like a foot of him, and he barely catches it. And they, we're now doing the, Big Trouble in Little China, like, pushing Will at each other because there's like not even special effects for that now. So it's like, I need you to look constipated with your arm outstretched. Okay. So, like, yeah.
Be a mime pushing an invisible wall that you can't move and
a
failing
soap bubble that's been spray painted with tentacles. So, yeah. That's your motivation. Don't get disintegrated. So they finally get to a point where Dresden has been pushing it back and everything like that, and it's starting to get really close to Ortega. It's crossed the halfway mark and then 3/4 and everything like that, and then Ortega realizes he's losing, so he starts talking shit, right? Quoting him, stop fighting at Dresden, make it painless for yourself. If you kill me, they will be executed. By surrendering, you preserve them. Miss Rodriguez, the policewoman, the investigator you apprenticed under, the owner of that bar, the knight and his family, the old man in the Ozarks, the wolf children at the university, all of them. buddy, you just said the wrong thing, so
Yeah.
good moment there. I think it's kind of funny that he calls him the old man in the Ozarks, because
Yeah,
it's
not
like, of all,
Ebenezer. Or
yeah, all the
Macaulay.
things he's clued into, he doesn't know Ebenezer is a wizard, let alone he's on the senior council. I find that a little weird, but it's like, they know about the alphas, so they've done their homework, just somehow missed the fact that Ebenezer, like, or maybe he's just trying to like personify him, and think of him as a person instead of what he represents or something. But
It is curious because obviously Ariana knew the connection between Ebenezer and Harry and has known
later,
for Harry's whole life. Um,
do we know? Oh yeah, because the fighting, right?
Mhm.
Because they knew when he fought
They
with
fought like family.
Maggie. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, so Ariana knew, and that's what Changes was all about. And also she was pissed off that Harry and Ebenezer kills Ortega with uh the satellite Dresden.
yes. Spoilers.
So so it's like they all know of each other. It is interesting not to have named him, or I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty weird. Like, you could have said your old man or something, like, to make it more of a personal connection instead of the old man in the Ozarks. Like, you
Maybe
know,
just to make Ebenezer seem vulnerable, of like he's not the battle wizard, he's not the Blackstaff because we don't know that
yeah,
title yet. He's
sure,
just that old man that you feel like you have to protect, which you
sure.
don't. But okay.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so Ortega's jaw clenched harder, the muscles in his face bulging. You'll destroy us all, starting with you, which I included this because he uses the word you'll destroy us all, which I felt was foreshadowing. I may be giving Jim a lot of credit here, but later on, right, everybody calls
Yeah.
Dresden the destroyer because they're worried about him being the fulcrum, but they're worried about him being a bad guy. And so I wonder if, like, that's what Ortega and everybody has been told, and why they're in league with the outsiders and whatnot, is because Dresden's going to be a destroyer, not whatever the opposite is in this case.
Yeah.
So, which we don't actually know that, do we?
Protector, I thought.
We know,
Or maybe we were
maybe,
guessing.
like, yeah, we know the fulcrum, and we know the destroyer, but that's interesting. 12 months, come on, answer some questions. Oh my god,
Yep.
we're gonna have 6 years of speculation out of that book. So 89%, guys, let's do this.
Yep.
So
Um I well, Ortega may not know anything about the whole Starborn stuff because I'm curious how much Ortega knows. He is a capable person. That's how he has the position that he has. But he's also just been Ariana's plaything. Ariana probably understands everything about the Starborn, I think. I don't know. It's guessing. We don't know anything actually about it, but she would also get credit for having destroyed a Starborn with Changes.
right.
Ortega's motivation in the beginning of Death Mask is he does not want the war because it is stupid, because it's going to kill people. So he says.
No, he doesn't want the war because it's too early and there will be
Yeah.
unnecessary deaths, because you guys made it a fair fight, and I told you we need to knife those sneaky bastards in the back before they even know what hit them, and somehow
Yeah.
you misconstrued that. Not pretending to be Ortega here, because
Yeah.
I forget who talks about it. I think it's Susan or Martin talks about, like, the reason why Ortega wants the duel to end, or the duel in peace, is because he wants to spend another 20 years and come back when they're ready for you and you've let your guard down again. And that logic and that everything that I've internalized for every kind of battle like this, that it's like, if you ever strike peace with the enemy, you got to have assurances that they're not going to be coming back to you stronger the next time. There's other real world examples I don't want to get into because politics and whatever, but it's like, I see other
The
things like
logic
that
is
where it's like,
sound.
yeah, because you didn't take it far enough, right? Because you didn't make assurances. And I'm not talking about like total annihilation or anything like that, but there has to be certain assurances, and you have to resolve what caused the conflict in the first place, right? Otherwise, they're just going to use it to bide their time and they're going to come back again. Leadership has got to change at a minimum, is usually maybe sufficient. Certainly if you're dealing with like, dictator types or whatever, you would call the patriarchy that the Red Court is, right? You'd have to have some kind of dynastic change at a minimum, right? But like dealing with vampires and like other immortals, they're like, oh no, we weren't ready for this, even though we were going to be ready in like 20 years, let's come back, which is also kind of funny because it's like 20 years is not going to be enough for wizards. It'll be enough for them to let their guard down maybe, but Dresden's going to be a whole lot more of a senior wizard than he is already. Then like you think that you're ready for him now. He's a punk kid. Now imagine when he's got some gray in his hair, so it's kind of interesting, but that's kind of the logic that they're dealing with, right? I think they cover that in like the next chapter or two.
Yeah, after all of the fighting kind of breaks out and everything is ruled null and void. And probably Martin just kind of explains everything because Susan gets knocked out and isn't able to talk. And so Martin just very calmly explains, like, yeah, we wanted everything to continue because we're terrorists and we like all of the fighting is going to happen. And this is proving our goal is good. And Justin just wants to hit him.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so continuing with this, because I want to see how close we can get to the end, because I think we're too close to break this up into another episode. So I hope you guys have taken your pee breaks and gotten more water, but that's your dadism for today. So Dresden says, starting with you, and then Ortega's like, you're a selfish, self-righteous madman. You murder and enslave children, I said. I shoved the Mordite sphere to within a foot of him. You threaten the people I love. I shoved it closer still. How does it feel, Ortega, being too weak to protect yourself? How does it feel to know you're about to die? And then Ortega does this little, wiggle thing to get out of his skin mask and starts gloating. Is like, I don't know. How does it feel, Dresden? And pulls the gun on him, So that's, of course, a cliffhanger into chapter 30 when a laser dot appears on Ortega's chest. So, which is like total amateur hour. Okay, guys, you've got a gun capable of shooting at somebody over the horizon, and you have a laser dot sight to make sure that you can shoot in a straight line. Okay, now granted, parabolic a little bit, right? But like just aim up just a little bit. Okay, and make sure that you get him in the top of the head. And like Wrigley, I don't think is so far that you got to worry too much about the curvature of the earth. But anyway.
Yeah, this is the part where like these distances for someone who is as trained as I think Martin is capable.
Sure,
then should not be.
Right? So.
Yeah, it should not be that much of a problem for someone like Martin. So you don't need a laser dot. The laser dot is essentially this is telling Dresden that something's afoot, instead of actually be needed by Martin to do the thing. So,
right. This is just too comical not to share a little bit. Like, you're not wrong, right? I want to read the book where that's what the bad guy is doing, or whatever. It's like we had to wait an extra 20 years because, damn it, the Lord of the Rings just came out and everybody's running around pretending to be Gandalf. So we had to wait until that wore off, because I was like, what image? They're wizards. Nobody knows they exist. Like the guy who spoils milk, that's the image we're ruining. So.
Right. I mean, the Merlin is the one that's trying to hold it up, I guess. And just like everything that the Merlin is, Dresden is not. And he put his name in the phone book.
Oh no, Merlin and Dresden are going to be closer than you think. Like I absolutely like. Didn't he win Edinburgh in cards against? Some creature?
I was trying to poke fun at Langtree, not the Merlin.
Okay, yes, you're right. That you're absolutely right. Stupid, their title being a name also, but wait until it's no longer the Merlin and it's the Dresden. You're the next Dresden of the White Council. So, but yeah, no, you're right. So, okay. So laser sight, thump hiss, because subsonic ammunition, everything like that. Susan throws Dresden his gear. All hell breaks loose. Ortega starts shooting wild because he just got nailed by a 50 caliber round. Susan tries to fight Ortega, but even in the wounded state he is, like, because of all the shenanigans, like I think of the scene out of Terminator 2 where they hit the T-1000 with the grenade and he's like splayed open and whatever. Because it's like Ortega's probably not that bad, right? But his skin mask is all shredded, and so you've got a very similar kind of thing going on. But then Susan's like, why don't I wrestle with that? And
Yeah.
so she goes over to like try and throw him, but he's still got enough of his wits and everything that he's actually putting up a credible fight, which is also kind of dumb because like you're fighting Red Court vampires. If you're not going to shoot him in the head, you should shoot him in the belly. One or the other of those is probably going to disable that guy. And best case scenario, you shoot him in the belly and then the head. Just saying.
Yeah.
So Kincaid is not screwing around, so he does all of those things, right? So Kincaid basically football carries the archive to the edge of the thing and gets her out, and then I think he shoots down a Red as he's running, so it's like shot in the belly, shot in the face, and keeps running and whatever. And then he comes out with a golf cart or like a golf bag full of shotguns, so
That was a
this is
gigantic
where
duffel bag. But
he had like 4 or more shotguns in there,
oh yeah.
at a
And
minimum.
at this time, I believe Ivy is killing a whole bunch of things with the Mordite.
That's coming. Yeah, because I grabbed that entire paragraph because it's very visual and fun. But yeah, like so the little cloud of darkness blurred toward the vampires and streaked into each in turn at the pace of a busy workman's hammer. Bang, bang, bang. When the Mordite sphere struck them, there was a flash of cold purple light, a swell of darkness, and then the sphere passed on through. It left ash and black bones raining down behind it. I could barely follow the Mordite sphere's path as it moved so fast. 1 second, the vampires were all there, then they were simply gone. Black bones and gray ash littered the ground around me. So yeah, like archive gets busy too. She did say with extreme prejudice, and you fucked with me. I cannot believe that you fucked with me. So, like, I just want to hear like this cute little 8-year-old just like pop off. She won't, but still, it'd be fucking hilarious. So
she saves that for Tessa when saying, "I like crayons."
Right. Yeah, so I think there's a lot more to this, but basically the only thing that I kept was, kind of what you were saying. So yeah, what I remember, Ortega gets free of Susan by hurling her into like the 4th level seats of the thing. And so Martin's there, propping her legs up and everything. Dresden gets there and they basically pick her up and get her out of there. They're talking on their way out that Thomas brought the fellowship in. So I felt that was important to highlight because I couldn't remember how they found out about all of this stuff and everything. So Thomas playing the game, right? And then Dresden basically makes Martin swear to take care of her and keep her safe. And Martin says, everything in my power, which, I feel like is important. As far as oaths go, when Dresden swears on his power, right? But maybe Martin's crossing his fingers, or maybe he meant it then. I don't know, but
it seems like Martin meant it up until everything that happens with Changes. And even then he was willing, he sacrificed himself first. Like he could have done it all.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, I'm missing some details here, but basically Dresden winds up with the rental car, or maybe he is driving the Blue Beetle, but it says I parked at the rental lot. I thought maybe he had the rental car or whatever, but I parked at the rental lot outside O'Hare about 5 minutes after 7. I got out of the car with my staff and rod in hand. There was only one old light burning on the lot, but the moon had risen huge and bright, and I had no trouble seeing Michael coming. His white truck came crunching to a halt on the gravel out in front of me. I walked around to the passenger door. Sonia swung it open for me and then slid over. He was wearing blue denim and a black cowboy hat. And then, Dresden's like, you're wearing the armor? I am wearing the armor. So,
there's an important point about the Thomas bringing in the fellowship is
Mhm.
The game as it's going on with the vampires, which of course is important in the next book, is Ortega felt that he had to approach Lord Wraith to get support, and Lord Wraith insulted Ortega by giving his unwanted son of here, go get Thomas killed, and that's me helping.
Right.
And that's why Thomas knew about it early enough to get Susan and Martin involved. But
There's a lot of ways you could slice that, right? Like that's how Ortega takes it, and like Thomas takes it as well a little bit. But it's
oh,
like
yeah.
you could also see it's like, dude, they sent Ortega. Like Ortega is not a slouch. Everybody was betting on Ortega for this fight. And so like maybe, maybe he just sent Thomas as like, Thomas isn't going to get in the way or whatever, as much as anything. Like Ortega's going to be fine. If he thought that whoever he sent as a second might actually have to do something, he would have sent one of the girls, or
But
something like
it's
that. But
this is
yeah,
a war that the White Court does not want to be in. They really don't want
sure.
to be active in. They're kind of just drug into it because the fact that they are vampires and therefore they're all on the same side, I guess.
Right.
And they kind of say that in Blood Rights as well. And if Lord Wraith cared, he would have sent Lara, who is
Sure.
capable and is like looked down upon nicely, versus Thomas of just get out of my way, because he also sent Thomas to Bianca's party where all of this happened.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's the second insult, especially and around Thomas. But it also for book reasons, right? It gives Thomas an excuse to be near Dresden,
Yeah. Yes.
so to move that part
Very
of the
valid.
plot forward. So yeah. But I know it's funny because like I for lack of a better word, it's a bit of cynicism because I'm like, why did you do this thing that I feel like doesn't make so much sense? And it was like because you had to do this for the plot. so so it becomes kind of like a contrivance, I feel like, so that we can move that part of the plot forward.
Yeah, I feel like the everything surrounding Thomas and the vampires is not as contrived as Fort Hill has a tattoo that we saw by accident because he was working on woodworking for the house in Michael's
That's
garage.
not contrived. That's a real story from real people. Catholic priests hunt vampires. Come on, that's a tale as old as time.
But they have tattoos?
Yeah. They were
Um,
young and stupid and drunk, and they went and got tattoos because that's what you do when you kill a vampire. I'm
and
not
we
really a
find out
tattoo guy, and I would go
by
get a tattoo with the boys if we put down a vampire. I would at least get one mark, and then people be like, "What the hell do you have a single black line?" Be like, "Well, because I started." Well, where's the rest? Well, that was 20
it
years
hurt.
ago. Like, I'm old and fat now. What do you want? Like, yeah. Yeah, hopefully I won't squeal the whole time like that guy in Moana, but maybe. So, um anyway, sorry, been watching that lately. So, yeah, so they talk about everything, and basically I skip over them getting suited up, which is a shame because they make a comment about Sonya wearing, a bulletproof vest, and like that's not going to do so much against like teeth and claws. And he's like, yeah, but it's got the trauma plates and the ceramic in it because I'm a progressive, or he breaks
Mhm.
out Kalashnikov and I'm a progressive and whatever. So, but they also talk about how everybody gets a sense of him, and that Michael feels it as more like a slimy, sickly kind of evil and whatever. And Sonya smells rotten eggs, right?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And so Michael's like, that's good. The sense presents itself differently for everybody, but focus on that. He's very much mentoring the young knight right now, right? Who didn't even realize he could do this, which is kind of important for the end of the book as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, so uh he can smell Sonya can smell Nicodemus. They call Murphy to submit the bomb threat, and then sneak in through maintenance. Um they're coming up the hallway, and basically one of Nicodemus's goons is there with an Uzi, and shoots shoots at Harry, but they kind of duck back and close the door. But Sonya interposes his body with this, bulletproof vest and everything, very Terminator style, and he takes, several rounds for Dresden as well. And they remark that it probably held up so well because it also had to pass through the steel door and whatever. But it's like, I mean, that's the bulletproof vest. Like if it is like an Uzi or something, it's probably like a 9mm. It's not like, you know, they've got armor piercing rounds in them or something. But
Yeah, unlikely to have armor piercing, but that's still that should hurt
it
a ton.
it stings, yeah, you know. But Sonya's a big boy, so he we're in action movie territory, right? Like go watch The Last Action Hero, right? That in the movie world, that's a flesh wound. In the real world, you'd be in the hospital for weeks. So
Mm.
worrying about, you know, sepsis and stuff like that. But yeah, so the goon basically walks up to the door to like push it in and shoot him down the stairwell and everything. And so when the shadow crosses the door, Michael takes Amarakius and buries it to the hilt through the door, which on my first reading I always found very brutal and kind of like, that's not making sure of your target, my dude. But with the bomb threat and everything, I feel like there's enough incidental stuff, and maybe Paladin senses, you know, he made a reasonable choice. But I was like, I would not have done that, because it's like, you never know. Like Maintenance Joe walks over there, but they had just been shot at, so it's like any of the mortals would have run by now, you know. So
We can chalk up a lot to Paladin senses, probably.
yeah, right, yeah, plot, it was plot relevant. But so aside from not confirming his target, really cool scene, right? So they discuss like where Nicodemus you know, would be doing the ritual, and then it's like the chapel, you know, everybody says at the same time. So they go to the chapel. There's two more goons inside that, you know, they more or less put down. I wanted to say too, I think this is the first time we see Michael kill a goon. I guess you could count Ursiel, right? Because he pretty much
goon.
Well, yeah, I know, but kind of, you know, because it's not like the angel died, but the dude did.
The dude did after he refused help. He got his head cut off. But like, yeah, if you're talking about the squires and those goons, yeah, this is probably it, because we haven't even really seen them before this now. Not really.
Right. But just, yeah, even like other stuff, like questionable on if he got any of the vampires, you know, or Fae or anything like that. So I don't know. It was just
probably got a few vampires in Bianca's party.
He had knives, maybe. So
we didn't have the sword at the time. That was the problem.
Right. Yeah. So anyway. And then everybody's all so sad. Shiro died. He was so young at 85. And then he like sputters back to life, and they're like, what the shit? So
zombie.
Yeah. So Shiro is still alive, so that he's here to explain everything about the curse, and then tells Dresden to take the sword and keep it and find who it belongs to. Because he's not so daft as to say, Dresden, it's calling you. You're the sword now, you know. So basically they find out Nicodemus has already moved on, and with the bomb threat, it seems like they've already made an escape for plan B. I didn't write down all the details, but I think Shiro was out, you know, and basically took note that their plan B was to like get on a train to St. Louis and everything. And so wouldn't you know it, this is one of those times where Dresden had made a phone call and was clever and everything, because he's got a plan and he's got a helper, right? And so Guard, flying Marcone's helicopter, swoops in to save the day. So yeah, Guard's flying, and then I want to say it's Michael, you know, makes the comment that it's like, oh, it's too bad we don't have any Wagner to send us off, and she kind of looks over her shoulder and smirks and flips a switch, you know. So Flight of the Valkyries comes on, because of course
I don't fully remember what they were saying, but Marcone was being a dick to Dresden and making his point, like he's getting his way. He gets to have the shroud or something like that. And
that's
Dresden,
coming. Yeah.
Okay. Because it's one of my, one of those lines that I quite like, and they just kind of floats in my head sometimes of like, you suck diseased moose wing, Marcone. And Guard thinks that he's talking about her.
No, yeah, it's those are two different moments, but yeah, the same scene, but yeah, for sure. Yeah, so basically yeah, like again, I think I got the response, but not the context. It actually happens the first couple of lines, but it's like Marcone put on the headset and spoke. The ride may be a bit bumpier. The stabilizers are run by an onboard computer, which has failed. And he gives Dresden a very direct look. I can only speculate as to why. And Dresden puts on a headset and says, "Blow me." And Guard's like, "Excuse me?"
Okay.
"Not you, Blondie. I was talking to Marcone." "It's all right, Miss Guard. Compassion dictates that we must make allowances. Mr. Dresden is a diplomatically challenged individual. He should be in a shelter for the tactless." So,
understatement of the century.
yes, yeah. So then they go back and forth, about how long do we have until we catch up? Let's talk about this. And they switch to a private channel. Dresden starts out calling him out, like, "Why didn't you tell me that you didn't send the hitter? Would you have believed me? No. Would you have thought I was playing some kind of game with you? Yes. Then why waste the time and make you more suspicious? Generally speaking, you are quite perceptive given enough time, and I know you well enough to know that I do not wish to have you as my enemy." I glowered at him. "Why do you want the shroud? That's none of your business." So they go back and forth like, "Why do you want the shroud?" "Well, why do you want the shroud?" "Well, I'm trying to prevent the apocalypse." "Well, apocalypses are bad for business, so let's just say we're on the same side." "Why don't I believe you?" "Because, given enough time, you are a perceptive individual." Let's see. Trying to see where that. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, they go back and forth, and they're right over the train, and they basically, Michael sits bolt upright and confirms that they're over the right train, because they had one that was a passenger train and two cargo trains, and they were like, well, they're not going to get on the passenger train because too much attention. They'd have to ditch the goons in the gear and whatever. And so Michael more or less confirms it with paladin senses, right? And then Marcone's like, "I'm going with you." No, you aren't. "I can always order Miss Guard to return to O'Hare, where we all die of the plague, since we didn't stop the Denarians. That may be. Either way, I'm going with you." And that's when he says, "You suck diseased moose wing, Marcone." So, how colorful. "My people tell me there are only 3 trains leaving Chicago." So this is where we deal with that. So, yeah. But this is where we also find out that it's a surplus Coast Guard helicopter, which is important because we needed a winch. And so they all get, their harnesses on and go over the edge. So, and then Marcone hits Dresden with the dadism of, "Nothing worth doing is ever easy, Dresden." So, because like, I'm not going down there with that on, so. Michael, of course, is the paladin, so he goes first. Sonya goes second. Yeah. Then Dresden goes, and White is a sheet and panicking, but he's got to go and look tough because Marcone's there. I didn't want to go, but I sure as hell wasn't going to chicken out in front of Marcone. So, then Marcone comes, which means that Hendricks is operating the winch because, Guard's flying the helicopter. So they
just got the muscles for it.
Well, he's not like manually lowering them. It's a winch. So I was thinking about that. I was like, it's funny how like his Murphyonic field doesn't disrupt the winch, but it's like a winch is an old enough technology. Maybe it's immune.
It's probably got like physical gears, but I could imagine it has something that needs to be manually like rotated or something just in case.
Sure. Yeah, as long as it doesn't have like a anti-lock kind of system, right, where it's trying to compensate for the wind and some other factors, right, as long as that computer part isn't in there. But they get a marching order with Marcone going first, Michael going first, Sonya as rear guard, but Marcone goes second because Harry won't go anywhere with Marcone behind him. So yeah. But Sonya's got his rifle, and then Marcone also has a rifle and looks like he knows how to use it. So Dresden makes a note. Yeah, but he makes a note that both Sonya and Marcone look like they are militarily trained, on how to use their rifles, which is important to note for Dresden because he's an amateur for everything, but that especially. So,
especially with guns.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Um, Michael has been in the military, so he knows his hand signals. So, he does the hold action and everything like that. Everybody closes and crouches. Um, Michael is pantomiming, the bad guys and everything like that. Um, and then Michael and Sonya both swing down between the cars and out of sight. When I faced the rear of the train again, I saw a nightmare running toward me over the cars. Whatever creation process this thing had undergone, it hadn't been a kind one. Four-legged and lanky, it looked vaguely like a cat, but it didn't have fur. Its skin was leathery, wrinkled, and mottled. Its head was somewhere between that of a jaguar and a wild boar. It had both tusks and fangs in its gaping, drooling mouth, and it moved with graceless speed. I let out a strangled cry, lifting my blasting rod. I pushed power through it, yelled the word, and loosed a flashing bolt of fire at it. The bolt hit the thing in the face just as it gathered itself to leap at me. It let out an unnerving, wailing cry and then convulsed in pain as it jumped and sailed off the side of the car. The fire blinded me for a moment, leaving a bright green dot over my vision. I heard the next one coming, but I couldn't see it. I dropped down to my stomach and yelled, Marcone. The rifle cracked 3 times in deliberately spaced reports. I heard the thing squeal and then saw it as my eyes started to adjust. It lay on top of the car, maybe 10 feet from me, hindquarters dragging, struggling to haul itself forward with one claw. Marcone stepped closer, lifted the hunting rifle, and coolly put another shot right between its eyes. The creature twitched, fell, and slid bonelessly over the side of the train. Marcone peered after it. What was that? Some kind of guard dog, I said. Interesting. Demon? Doubt it. Demons are usually a lot tougher. Then what was it? How the hell should I know? Never seen anything like it before. Where are Michael and Sonya?
And it never comes back again.
Yeah, Dresden committing the wizard sin of like, I don't know. Fuck if I know, man. So yeah. So they go to look. The next car was an empty one with spaced wooden slats, blah blah blah. So there were 3 men in it, unconscious or dead. Dead? Marcone asked. Napping, Sonya said. Michael nodded. We should finish them. These men are fanatics. Sorry, Marcone nodded. These men are fanatics. I'm like, man, Michael's hardcore all of a sudden. If they wake up, they'll attack us without hesitation, armed or not. Dresden says, we're not going to murder them in cold blood. Is there a particular reason why not? Shut up, Marcone. Well, you
go to war with paladins on your side. You have to play by different rules.
Yeah. Yeah. So they argue it, but Dresden, of course, cannot come up with anything resembling reason. He just is trying to brute force his way through the conversation. And then Marcone, gets a bitter smile and then throws some handcuffs over to Sonya. So, I mean, he's prepared at least. So there, I suppose we'll just have to take the chance that none of them will chew off his own hand at the wrist and slip free. So, let's see. Trying to think. Sonya gets jumped. I think it's Deirdre, but it hasn't said specifically. So Sonya shoves his assault rifle to Dresden, throws it to him basically. Dresden catches it, and he pushed past him and hauled himself up with his right arm, and drew Esperachius in a blaze of more white light. So yeah, Marcone takes the AK-47 from Dresden. You're going to hurt yourself. He took the assault rifle out of my hands, checks a couple of things without needing to look at the weapon, and then slung it over his shoulder as he climbed out of the car. I muttered to myself and went up the wooden slats beside him. So, it was Nicodemus that they were fighting. So, and they tell Harry to stay back, and Nicodemus sucker punches Michael because Michael turned to look at Harry like an amateur. So Nicodemus used that distraction to attack. Let's see. Yeah, Sonya pushed Nicodemus back to the far side of the car. But Dresden saw the trap coming and shouted, "Sonya, back off!" But the Russian couldn't stop his forward momentum entirely, but he pivoted and lunged to one side. As he did, steely blades erupted from within the car. The metal of the roof screamed as the blades pierced it, rising to a height of 4 or 5 feet in a line, a half a breath behind Sonya. Nicodemus turned to pursue the Russian. Michael got to his feet, whipped the heavy blade of Amarakius around, and slashed 3 times at the roof of the rail car. A triangular section of 3 feet across fell down into the car, and the edges of the metal glowed dull orange with the heat of the parted steel. Michael dropped down through the hole and out of sight. It's a good thing they're also Jedi, so, you know. Yeah. Because I gotta imagine cargo rail cars, like, that's some heavy duty steel. Like, you're not cutting through that with a normal sword. So yeah. So Nicodemus sends Anduriel over at Dresden, you know, to kind of harry him while he's chasing Sonya around. And then Sonya gets stabbed through, like one of his legs gets stabbed out from under him. So, and then Michael and Deirdre are fighting, but we can't see it. So I heard Deidre's demon form shriek in the car beneath us. The blades harassing Sonya vanished. So. And then Nicodemus slams his boot down on Sonya's wounded arm. So just like a lot of brutality. But that's when Marcone opens up with the AK-47. So, you know, not gonna do it, but Marcone shot in 3 chattering bursts of fire. The first one tore through Nicodemus's chest and neck just above the shroud. The next hit on his arm and shoulder opposite the shroud, all but tearing it off his torso. The last burst ripped apart his hip and thigh on the hip opposite the shroud's drape. Nicodemus' expression blackened with fury, but the bullets had torn half his body to shreds, and he toppled from the car and out of sight. Below, there was another demonic shriek and the sound of wrenching metal. The shrieks faded toward the front of the train, and a moment later, Michael climbed up the ladder rungs on the side of the boxcar, his sword in its sheath. So, drove off Deidre. Nicodemus fell.
Bad guys vanquished.
A temporary win, right? So. Yeah, so Marcone's pissed off because it looked like Nicodemus took the shroud with him. Let's see. Yeah, so Dresden's like, no, we won't. You didn't kill him. You probably just pissed him off. Do you think so? The damage seemed fairly thorough. I don't think he can be killed. Interesting. Can he run faster than a train? Probably. Do you have another clip? So, as it turned out, I was mistaken. Nicodemus could not run faster than a train. He flew faster than a train. So he's doing his Batman thing with Anduriel. So he came sailing down out of the sky. His shadows spread like an immense bat wings. His sword flashed toward Marcone. Marcone's reflexes could make a striking snake look sluggish, and he dodged and rolled out of the way of the Donarian sword. Nicodemus sailed to the next car on the train and landed in a crouch facing us. A glowing sigilette appeared on his forehead, the sign itself something twisting, nauseating to look upon. His skin was marred and ugly where Marcone's shots had hit him, but it was whole and getting better by the second. His face twisted in fury and a kind of ecstatic agony, and his shadow flooded forward over the length of the rail car in front of him, dipping down between his car and ours. Oh, and then he uncouples the cars with Anduriel. So, yeah, let's see. Marcone sprints over and jumps over the gap. Dresden does the same thing. I imagined missing the other car and landing on the track. See, internal monologue. We got to have stuff like this. Like, do we have a splat of like road runners and like, oh, geez, and you know, so. But he uses Fozari to make sure that he makes the leap. So the raw force I sent out behind me shoved me forward. Actually, it shoved me too far forward. I landed closer to Nicodemus than either Michael or Marcone, but at least I didn't wind up sprawled at his feet. Yeah. Nicodemus is trash talking, so I was just trying to see if it was anything important. So, give up the shroud, Nicodemus, Michael shouted. It's not yours to take. Oh, yes, it is. You certainly will not be able to stop me. And when I've finished you and the wizard, I'll go back for the boy. 3 nights in a day, as it were. He can't make bad puns. That's my shtick. So, had to include that.
Yes, that is an important line to keep there.
Yeah. At least he didn't overlook you entirely, Marcone answered. I feel somewhat insulted. Yeah. Hey, old Nick, can I ask you a question? Please do, wizard. Once we get to the fighting, there really isn't going to be much opportunity for it. Why? Beg pardon? Why? Why the hell are you doing this? I mean, I get why you stole the shroud. You needed a big battery, but why the plague? Have you read Revelations? Not in a while, but I just can't buy that you really think that you're touching off the apocalypse. Nicodemus shook his head. Dresden, the apocalypse, as you refer to it, isn't an event. At least it isn't any specific event. One day, I'm sure there will be an apocalypse that really does bring on the end, but I doubt it will be this event that begins it. Then why do this? Apocalypse is a frame of mind, a belief, a surrender to inevitability. It is despair for the future. It is the death of hope. Michael said quietly, and in that kind of environment, there is more suffering, more pain, more desperation, more power to the underworld and their servants. Exactly. We have a terrorist group prepared to take credit for this plague. It will likely stir up reprisals, protests, hostilities, all sorts of things. One step closer, said Michael. That's how he sees it. Progress. I like to think of it as simple entropy. The real question to my mind is, why do you stand against me? It is the way of the universe, Knight. Things fall apart. Your resistance is pointless. In answer, Michael drew his sword. Ah, eloquence. So he tells Harry to stay back so that he doesn't be a distraction for Michael. Let's see. So, of course, Marcone and Dresden are taking notes while they're dueling behind them. Like, shooting him hardly seems to inconvenience him. I take it the knight's sword can harm him. Michael doesn't think so. Then why is he fighting him? Because it needs to be done.
And he's a paladin. Paladin's paladining.
Right. Do you know what I think? Marcone said. You think we should shoot Nicodemus in the back at the first opportunity and let Michael dismember him? Yes. So
they're buddies.
Right. I drew my gun. Okay. So, yeah. The bonding,
Mm-hmm.
not until the locker scene do we get such bonding as this, so.
Yeah, it takes a while.
Just then, Demon Girl Deidre's glowing eyes appeared several cars ahead of us and came forward at a sprint. I caught a glimpse of her before she jumped onto our car, still all supple scales and hairstyle by the Tasmanian devil. But in addition, she had a sword gripped in one hand. Michael, behind you! What did I say about distractions, Dresden? This is exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. So... I acted without thinking. I stripped Shiro's cane from my back and shouted, Michael, and threw the cane to him. Michael didn't so much as turn his head. He reached out and caught the cane because I am one with the Force and the Force is with me.
Yeah.
And with a sweep of his arm, threw the cane sheath free of the sword so that Philolachius's blade shone with its own light. Without pausing, he swung the second sword and struck Deidre's tangling hair from his arm, sending her stumbling back. Nicodemus attacked him, and Michael met him squarely, shouting, O day, lava code est sordium. Sorry, my Latin's a little rusty. Cleanse what is unclean, O God. Internal monologue. Do we subtitle this? Anyway. Michael managed to hold his ground against Nicodemus, their blades ringing. Michael drove Nicodemus to one side, and I had a shot at his back. I took it. Beside me, Marcone did at the same time. So... I mean, come on. It's just like Hawkeye. So just start blasting. So Like, we know it's not going to work, but maybe it'll distract him for Michael. So the shots took Nicodemus by surprise and stole his balance. Michael shouted and pressed forward on the offensive, seizing the advantage for the first time. Both shining blades dipped and circled through the attack after attack, and Michael drove Nicodemus back step by step. Hell's bells, he's going to win. Shut up, Dresden. But Nicodemus drew a gun from the back of his belt. He shoved it against Michael's breastplate and pulled the trigger repeatedly. Light and thunder made even the rushing train sound quiet. Michael fell and did not move. The two swords went out. So yeah, so they start shooting. We didn't do too badly considering we were standing on a moving train and all, but Nicodemus didn't seem to care. He walked toward us through the bullets, jerking and twitching occasionally. He casually kicked the two swords over the side of the train. I ran dry in bullets, and Nicodemus took the gun from my hand with a stroke of his sword. It hit the top of the boxcar once and then bounced off into the night. Damn it. That was my office gun. So the train thundered down a long, shallow grade toward a bridge. Demon girl Daedra leapt over to her father's side on all fours, her face distorted in glee. Tendrils of her hair ran lovingly over Michael's unmoving form. I drew my unfocused shield into a regular barrier before me and said, "Don't even bother offering me a coin. Hadn't planned on it. You don't seem like a team player to me. But I've heard about you, Marcone. Are you interested in a job?" "I was just going to ask you the same thing," Marcone said. "Bravo, sir. I understand. I'm obliged to kill you, but I understand." Yeah, so it was just striking me as odd. So Anduriel closes in with Dresden and starts wrenching on his, like, gets around his shield and starts wrenching on his arm to throw him off balance and basically get his shield down. Marcone was ready. He let one of his empty guns fall and produced a knife from somewhere on his person. He flicked it at Nicodemus's face. I went for his gun hand when he flinched. They fucking Supermaned him. I didn't remember that. Like that scene where they empty the clip into Superman, but then they throw the gun at his face and then he
Why do you
ducks.
expect me to know this thing?
Because you're a nerd. Like, this should be in
Why
your
do you
DNA.
Why do you expect me to know anything about Superman?
Put a note right now and go watch the scene so that the next time I reference it, you will know it. It's called learning. So I'm teaching you something here. So yeah, Dresden's trying to get the gun. Marcone goes at him with another knife. And he feels the release of energy as the shroud was removed, a wave of fever-hot magic that swept over me in a sudden potent surge. When it was gone, my chills and my aching joints were gone with it. The curse had been broken. "No, kill him!" Classic. So, yeah. I pried the gun from Nicodemus's fingers. He caught me by the hair, jerked my head back, and got his arm around my throat. He started choking me, hissing, "It's going to take days to kill you, Dresden." "He's afraid of you," said Ben Kenobi. I'm sorry, said Shiro's voice in my head. So, I mean, how do you not? Like, that's going to have to be the ghostly voiceover, right? You
can have Shiro showing in like blue, white light on the
right.
side.
Do we go that far? I mean, that's how Dresden would imagine it. It's Dresden. We
Yes.
didn't do that. That's
Are you going to get sued by Disney?
For
You
what?
cannot
Putting a
afford-
ghost? If Shiro shows up with like robes and a lightsaber, maybe, but like, it's the first time a ghost, like, come on, Macbeth, Christmas Carol, like, on and on and on. Like, there's hundreds of years of precedent. So,
right. If he's a ghost, that's one thing. If he's a Force ghost that's all blue, you probably have a lawsuit.
Nope. We'll make him look like Marley and Marley or whatever. So, and then he'll start singing. That one's for you, EG, because I know you're watching. So,
yes, yeah. That is the Muppet. He has to be a Muppet.
Was that a reference that you got? See, this is how all of my
See,
references
I have
work.
actually been
just
forced
say
to
them
watch that movie, so
whether you understand. What do you mean forced? That is an American classic with a British actor at the helm, written by another British guy. Right? I don't remember. Was he might have been American. Who cares? Stupid Dickens. Yeah. Anyway.
I do believe Dickens was English, if that's who you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. The author. That's what I'm saying. So
I think
Michael
everything
Caine
took place in
and
London.
the author. Yeah, that's stupid. Like Americans have never written anything that takes place in London. So anyway, it's a national treasure, a different nation though, over the pond. So, okay. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, so they try to throw Nicodemus off the side of the train. Let's see. Dresden is choking him out with the noose as well. That's what I wanted to make sure. And then I think Nicodemus reacted in sudden and obvious panic, releasing my throat and struggling to get away. I held on for dear life and dragged him off balance. I tried throwing him off the train, letting go of the noose at the last moment. He went over the edge, but Deirdre let out a shriek and leapt forward, her tendrils writhing around one of his arms and holding him. Kill him now. Coughing and wheezing, I picked up Michael's still form as best as I could and leapt off the train. I did not remember that. So, yeah, that's crazy. We hit the water together. Michael sank because he's in armor, you dipshit. Yeah. I sank too. I tried to get us out, but I couldn't, and things started to become confusing and blank. I had almost given up trying when I felt something near me in the water. I thought it was a rope, and I grabbed it. I was still holding on to Michael as whoever had thrown the rope started pulling me out. It wasn't Marcone, or it was Marcone. He hadn't thrown me a rope. He'd hauled me out with the shroud.
Yes. Two
several
heavy,
1,000-year-old
grown men being
in armor.
on each. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. All right. 13 pages. So sorry it's going so long, but we're just going to do it at this point. So I woke up in the back of Michael's pickup, staring up at the stars and the moon, and in considerable pain. Sonia sat at the back of the truck facing me. Michael lay still and unmoving beside me. He's awake. Man, there's a lot that happens if this is the last chapter, right? Because is this not where we find out about Persephone and the coin? And holy crap, what a dense chapter. Yeah. Murphy's voice came from the front of the truck. Harry, be still, okay? We don't know how badly you've been shot. Okay. Hi, Murph. It should have torn. What? Shroud. It should have torn like wet tissue. That just makes sense, right? Harry, be still and don't talk. The next time I opened my eyes, I was in the morgue. This, all by itself, is enough to really ruin your day.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's one of the things I do with the kids whenever somebody gets oofed, as we call it on TV, because they're not dead, they're an actor. So oofing means that they can come back and whatever. But yeah, instead of saying oofed or whatever, it's either he dead or he's having a really bad day, which is especially funny when you see like an entire battleship explode or a planet or something. Be like, yeah, that's a bad day, guys. Like, you know, just oversimplify, but. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Anyway, I'm not dead. I sputtered. I'm not dead. Murphy appeared in my field of vision, her hand on my chest. We know that, Harry. Easy. We've got to get the bullet out of you. We can't take you to the emergency room. They have to report any gunshot wounds. I don't know, Butter said. This x-ray is all screwed up. I'm not sure it's showing me where the bullet is. If I don't do this right, I could make things worse. You can do it. The technical stuff always messes up around him. Plus, you're an incipient Knight of the Cross, so the angels are going to help you do the surgery. So Michael stood over me at one point, his hand on my head. Easy, Harry. It's almost done. See? Angels. And I thought, great. I'm going to require an armed escort to make sure I get to hell. When I woke up again, I was in a small bedroom. Stacks and boxes and shelves of fabric filled the place nearly to the ceiling, and I smiled, recognizing it, the carpenter's guest room. On the floor next to the bed was Michael's breastplate. There were 4 neat holes in it where the bullets had gone through. I sat up, my shoulder screamed at me, and I found it covered in bandaging. Yeah, okay. So little Harry is there. Hi. He dutifully lifted his pudgy fingers and waved them at me. I'm Harry, he said. He frowned thoughtfully or I'm Harry, I said. He frowned thoughtfully and said, Harry. Good enough, kid. He ran off a minute later, came back, reaching way up over his head to hold on to his daddy's fingers. Michael came into the room and smiled at me. So we get description. Yeah. I smiled tiredly at him. Your faith protects you, eh? Sorry, emotional. So Michael reached down and turned the breastplate around. There was a cream-colored material lining the inside of the breastplate with several deep dents in it. He peeled it back to show me layers and layers of bulletproof fabric and backing ceramic strike plates set against the front of the breastplate. My faith protects me. My Kevlar helps. So,
and Charity is no slouch.
Yeah, I laughed a little. Charity made you put it in. She did it herself. She said she wasn't going to spend all the trouble of making the breastplate and then have me get killed with a gun. She made the breastplate, all of my armor. She used to work on motorcycles. My shoulder throbbed hard enough to make me miss the next sentence. Sorry, what did you say? I said you'll need to take all your medicine. Can you handle some food first? I had soup. It was exhausting. Several days pass. And then Sonia comes over. He seems to have come out. Everything was okay. Marcone, after getting me and Michael out of the water, had called Murphy and told her where to find us. She had already been on the way and got there in only a couple of minutes. The train, the crew of the train, it had turned out had been killed. There were 3 goons that had been trussed up on the train, had bitten down on suicide pills, and were dead when the cops found them. Murphy had taken us all to Butters instead of to the emergency room since once my gunshot wound was reported. Rudolph and company could have made my life hell. And Murphy bitches about it anyway, because of course she does. So
yeah, why not? It's just what he deserves for causing all this trouble.
I know the scene that I'm looking for with Persephone and why it's not where I think it is, because it doesn't happen later, because it happens with Demeter, not with Marcone. I knew it couldn't be Marcone because of the soul gaze. I'm thinking the kid, like when we see Persephone get shot. That's not this book. That's a different book.
Correct. That's not this book, but we do know that there's somebody who's asleep at the end of this book.
Yeah, we see that. I was just mixing those moments because I'm like, dude, how are you going to squeeze that in like 3 other things in the final chapter? You're not. That's how. So, but yeah.
Because this writer's room exercise is really just a reread in disguise. So
it's a true story. So, but yeah. We might as well take time to note additional material while we're going through all this. Yeah, so they promote Rudy to internal affairs. That's where that happens, So
promotion, well deserved.
Sure, yeah. I mean, he did nothing and got promoted. That's how that works. So, but at least he probably followed orders real well. So, yeah. So they somehow got the swords back. So Michael just says, we got the swords back. This is for you. And tries to give Dresden Shiro's sword. You'll have a better idea what to do with it than me. I told him. Shiro wanted you to have it. Oh, and you got some mail. I what? To Harry Dresden. And it's your address, Mike. And it's your address, Michael, postmarked 2 weeks ago. Michael shrugged. This is Shiro's letter, I think. Right. So
explaining that he was dying.
Yeah. I could read the whole thing, but not without crying. So we're just you're going to have to go read that. But I read over
Shiro
the medical
got a happy
report.
Ending, even though it didn't seem like it.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, he's definitely going to Valhalla, right? Like I'd say that counts. So, but like if throwing a juice box at somebody's head counts to get into Valhalla, I got to say fighting off multiple plagues would do that, So, but yeah, Dresden explains to Michael terminal cancer. He knew it when he came here. Now I understand. I don't. Shiro must have known that we would need you to stop the Denarians. It's why he traded himself for your freedom and why he accepted the curse in your place. Why? You were the one we needed. You had all of the information. You were the one who realized Cassius was masquerading as Father Vincent. You had contacts with the local authorities to give you access to more information, to help us when we needed the concourse emptied. You were the one who could call in Marcone for his help. I'm
Michael
not sure
has
that says...
identified the main character.
Yeah, right. Ah, shit, I'm a sidekick, aren't I?
Right.
Yeah. I'm not sure that says anything good about me, I said, glowering. It says that you were the right man in the right place and at the right time. What of the shroud? Does Marcone have it? I think so. How should we handle it? We don't. I do. All right. Oh, the dry cleaners called. They said they're going to charge you a late fee if you don't swing by and pick up your laundry today. I'm running out for groceries. I can take you. I don't have anything that goes to the dry cleaners.
Yeah.
I want to play that so straight in the scene because he's like, I don't go to the dry cleaners. What makes you think I've got money for the dry cleaners? So,
I mean, Susan remarks in the beginning of like, are you expecting so? You smell of fabric softener. When have you ever used fabric softener?
Right. Yeah. The dry cleaners had my leather duster. It had been cleaned up and covered with a protective treatment. In the pockets were the keys to the Blue Beetle, along with a bill to a parking garage. On the back of the bill, written in flowing letters, were the words, "Thank you." So I guess Anna Valmont wasn't all that horrible of a person after all. But then I've always been a sucker for a pretty face.
With a charge. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she left him the bill, right? So, like,
of course,
presumably.
That's just professional.
Like, yeah, right? Yeah. Susan and Harry closing up, like, what happened? Well, I got shot and stabbed and Shiro died and, all that stuff. Let's see. Harry, I'm sorry I wasn't around. By the time I was conscious, we were already over Central America. So she doesn't smell his fabric softener, but so he's opening mail while he's talking to her because the 90s, and he's got a summons from Larry Fowler's lawyers.
Yep. That's when this whole thing starts.
So, yeah. Whether or not he can, this is going to cost me a fortune in legal fees. Smarmy, mealy-mouthed jerk. Then I hate to add more bad news. Ortega is back in Casa Verde recovering. He's called in his strongest knights and let it be widely known that he's coming to kill you personally. Which it's like, what, didn't he have this whole plan about how everybody Dresden knew was going to get murdered and people were already in position and, what an amateur. Not. Like,
it was just a bluff.
Yeah. Susan said something in Spanish, not into the phone, and sighed, damn, I have to go. Saving nuns and orphans, leaping tall buildings in a single bound. I should probably put on some underwear. You joke around a lot more than you used to. I like it. Yeah, so you joke. I learned it from you. I should open a school. Maybe so. Yep. More back and forth. They trade I love yous, even though, it doesn't mean anything. So I whispered goodbye, and that was the end of that. Of course, he's never seen or heard from her again. Mm-hmm. I woke up to a ringing telephone the next day. Haas, Ebenezer said, you should watch the news today. And then he hung up on me. I went down to a nearby diner for breakfast and asked the waitress to turn on the news. She did. Quoting the news, extraordinary event reminiscent of the science fiction horror stories around the turn of the millennium. What appears to be an asteroid fell from space and impacted just outside the village of Casa Verde in Honduras. The screen flickered to an aerial shot of an enormous smoking hole in the ground and a half-mile wide circle of trees that had been blasted flat. Just past the circle of destruction stood a poor-looking village. However, information coming in from agencies around the world indicates that the so-called meteor was in actuality a deactivated Soviet communication satellite, which decayed in orbit and fell to Earth. No estimates of the number of deaths or injuries in this tragic freak accident have yet reached authorities, but it seems unlikely that anyone in the manor house could possibly have survived the impact. I sat slowly back, pursing my lips. I decided that maybe I wasn't sorry Asteroid Dresden turned out to be an old Soviet satellite after all, and I made a mental note to myself to never get on Ebenezer's bad side, something that I immediately put in the bin because then I proceed to do this 10 books later. So,
a couple of times, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Then Dresden gets to do his sleuthing thing. He tails Marcone, so it wasn't easy.
Conveniently waited until this worked into Dresden's schedule to tail him.
It's possible he's been going there for a couple of days. I think that's what actually happens, though. But yeah, he changed cars twice and somehow called into effect the magical equivalent of a destructive electromagnetic pulse that scrambled my beacon spell. Only quick thinking and some inspired thaumaturgy combined with my investigative skills let me stay with him. Dresden rolled a 20. So
all the while, Dresden was following him in his multicolored blue Beetle. Like, Dresden didn't get rental cars, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So Marcone stopped at a room and went inside. I stood at the window, keeping track of him. The paper tag on the door from the hall read Doe Jane in big permanent marker letters that were faded with age. There was a single bed in the room and there was a girl on it. She wasn't old. I'd place her in her late teens or early 20s. She was so thin it was hard to tell. She wasn't on life support, but her bed covers were flawlessly unwrinkled. Combined with her emaciated appearance, I was guessing she was in a coma, whoever she was. Marcone reads her a book. Yeah, let's see. He had put a teddy bear with her, and then he peeled down the outermost blanket on her bed and carefully laid the shroud over the girl, folding its ends in a bit to keep it from spilling out. Then he covered it up with a blanket. His head bowed. I had never pictured John Marcone praying, but I saw him forming the word please over and over. He waited for another hour, then his face sunken and tired. He rose and kissed the girl on the head. He put the teddy bear back into the backpack, got up, and left the room. I went to his car and sat down on the hood. Marcone stopped in his tracks and stared at me when he saw me. I just sat there. He padded warily over to his car and said, voice quiet, "How did you find me?" "Wasn't easy. Is anyone else with you?" "No." I saw the wheels spinning in his head. I saw him panic a little. I saw him consider killing me. I saw him force himself to slow down and decide against any rash action. He nodded once and said, "What do you want?" "The shroud." "No. I just got it here." I saw. "Who's the girl?" "Okay, Marcone, you can give me the shroud or you can explain it to the police when they come here to search this place." You can't do it to her. She'd be in danger." "She's yours? I'll kill you. If you so much as breathe in her direction, I'll kill you, Dresden, myself." I believed him. "What's wrong with her?" "Persistent vegetative state, coma. You wanted it to heal her? That's why you had it stolen?" "Yes." "I don't think it works like that. It isn't as simple as plugging it into a light or plugging in a light, but it might work. Maybe. I'll take it. It's all I have." I looked back toward the window and was quiet for a minute. I made up my mind. 3 days. What? 3 days. 3 is a magic number, and supposedly that's how long Christ was wrapped in it. 3 days. 3 sunrises. You should know whether it's going to help or not. And then? Then the shroud is returned in a plain brown wrapper to Father Forthill at St. Mary of the Angels. No note, no nothing, just returned. "And if I don't, you'll expose her?" "No, I won't do that. I'll take it up with you."
Because they're
All
buddies.
Right. Yeah. Well, because we're about to knock each other's teeth out and then go get a beer. So, yeah. When I'd first met Marcone, he tricked me into a soul gaze. Though I hadn't known the specifics, I knew then that he had a secret, one that gave him the incredible amount of will and inner strength needed to run one of the nation's largest criminal empires. He had something that drove him to be remorseless, practical, and deadly. Now I knew what that secret was. Yeah. It would have been easier to hate Marcone. I just couldn't do it. Not yet, anyway. So then we do the barbecue at Michael's a couple of days later. So let's see. Molly sat cross-legged on the couch near Sonia with a phone book in her lap and my shopping list she'd picked up from the treehouse laid flat over one half of it. Her expression was serious, but her eyes were sparkling as she drew a red line through another entry in the book. How strange, she said, and read off another number. Sonia started dialing. Hello, sir. Could you please tell me if you have Prince Albert in a can? He blinked again, mystified, and reported to Molly. They hung up again. Weird, Molly said
This
and
joke
winked at
was
me.
before my time. I actually had to look up what the joke was.
This is why I make references that you need to go learn. Like, it's this book. Harry has Prince Albert in a can.
Yeah, but I didn't know why people were hanging up on it because I didn't know it was a
But
joke.
he
that
should
people were
let him
doing.
out. So, yeah.
But I never heard the punchline.
Is your refrigerator running?
Nope.
You better catch it. So, yeah. Really? You like none of those? Like, didn't you watch The Simpsons?
The fridge. No, I didn't actually.
Oh, geez. You skipped that level of indoctrination because this is a very Bart Simpson, like, you know.
Yes, my mother believed that if I watched The Simpsons, I would become stupid.
Oh, that was a mistake. Yeah. Come on. Yeah. This one's not even a phone prank, but one of the ones that comes to mind is like Bart walks in with, you know, mooning everybody like, I'm Dr. Butts, but I'm a little behind. You know, I've been making my rounds, but I'm a little behind. So like, and he prank phone calls Mo all the time. Like, it's
I remember
hilarious.
seeing some of those. And don't worry, I'm now actually watching through The Simpsons. I'm at the end of season 3 now.
You're gonna have gray hair by the time you're done. So
yeah, I think they're probably gonna stop around season 9 or 10, but like we were told, like these are the seasons that are worth it, and so started at season 2 going onwards.
It's kind of tough because like I think 2 years back now, the wife and I started going through the Treehouse of Horrors because, you know, with streaming platform that's not getting plugged here, they grouped them all together, so it was really easy to just binge those. And I found out that almost all of my Simpsons references come out of there. Like 80 or 90% of my Simpsons references just come from the Treehouse of Horrors, you know. So that was kind of funny going through them. I was like, oh, holy crap, that was this episode, that was this thing, you know, him getting stuck in 3D. I'm like, I'm somewhere where I don't know where I am, you know, just like all of that stuff. Like there's a few other notable things to add to it, right? Like it's definitely worth it. But like if you want to crash course, you know, that'd be where you would go. Anyway, so let's see. So I left before I started choking on a laugh I had to hold back and went out to the front yard. Little Harry was there by himself playing in the grass in sight of his little sister inside. Hey, you kid, you shouldn't be out here all by yourself. People will accuse you of being a reclusive madman. Next thing you'll know, you'll be wandering around saying, whoas, bud. I heard a clinking sound. Something shiny landed in the grass by little Harry, and he immediately pushed himself to his feet, wobbled, and then headed for it. I panicked abruptly and lunged out ahead of him, slapping my hand down over a polished silver coin before the child could squat down and pick it up. I felt a prickling jolt shoot up my arm and had the sudden intangible impression that someone nearby was waking up from a nap and stretching. I looked up to see the car on the street. Driver's side window rolled down. Nicodemus sat at the wheel. Goodness. Relaxed and smiling. Be seeing you, Dresden. He drove away. I took my shaking hand from the coin. Lashiel's blackened sigil lay before my eyes. I heard a door open and on pure instinct palmed the coin and slipped it in my pocket. I looked back to find Sonia frowning and looked up and down the street. His nostrils flared a few times and he paced over to stand near me. He sniffed a few more times and then peered down at the baby. Aha, someone is stinky. He swooped the kid up in his arms, made him squeal and laugh. You mind if I steal your playmate for a minute, Harry? Go ahead. I need to get going anyway. Yeah. So, let's see. I left the cookout without saying goodbye, headed home, and I heard something the whole time, something whispering almost inaudibly. I drove it out with a loud and off key singing and got to work. 10 hours later, I put down the excavating pick and glowered at the 2-foot hole I had chipped in my lab's concrete floor. The whispering in my head had segued into Sympathy for the Devil by the Stones. Harry, whispered a gentle voice. So we're going to have to do some of that, right? You got to have the whispers. Yeah. So, yeah. I dropped the coin into the hole. I slipped a steel ring about 3 inches across around it. I muttered to myself and willed the energy into the ring. The whispering abruptly cut off. I dumped 2 buckets of cement into the hole and smoothed it until it was level with the rest of my floor. After that, I hurried out of the lab and shut the door behind me. Let's see. Yeah. He's looking at Shiro's cane, and Mister is like, meowing at him and stuff. So, let's see. He takes Susan's picture down, put the postcards in a brown envelope, picked up the jeweled box that held the dinky engagement ring I'd offered her that she turned down. I put them all away in my closet. I laid the old man's cane on my fireplace mantle. Maybe some things aren't meant to go together, things like oil and water, orange juice and toothpaste. Me and Susan. But tomorrow was another day. Scene. Yay, we did it. Woo. We totally should have done 2 episodes.
Yeah, started getting that feeling around like the half hour afterwards. Like, this is longer than we expected, but we get to move on to the next book next time, because next week we're doing FMA, and I will actually totally do the homework this time, I promise. And the week after that we do our Secret Santa, and then the week after that is FMA again, I think. And so it'll be a while for Blood Rights.
Yep.
So, well, thanks for sticking around, everybody.